There's a guy on Bannon saying conservatives are just becoming groypers and geeks, quote unquote, or that they're at risk of doing so. Apparently, this guy is representing himself as an amateur musician and composer who doesn't release his music. It was mentioned just at the end of the current War Room podcast. I was just thinking of this question. Let me try to set up I say that sort of apropos of nothing in a way, but also because I'm thinking of a classical theme in connection to the presentation I was going to do anyway, which is, in this presentation, we'll try to compare two situations. One, Heidegger's account of the question of Design's Vergessenheit, or the being forgetfulness in the face of the technological essence, or aka the accelerationism, and something else, something a little bit unusual, which speaks to the Greek origins. So it's interesting. I'm not interested in selling it as a sort of as a political issue, so to speak. It interests me more. It should be understood from some kind of let's just say it from fairness, from intellectual fairness. I think that's the simplest way to say it, from a place of intellectual fairness. So in the political, intellectual fairness is never really believed, I think, because one side, I guess maybe for the reason Strauss is often cited, which comes from Hobbes, although that makes one wonder if it's more a feature of our current politics. Hopefully it is, I suppose. More a feature of our current politics, or the politics of the last 400 years or 500 years. And Hobbes says, as oft as it's a candidate also, this whole subject matter is a candidate for the essence of liberalism, or what gives liberalism its distinctive character. It's connected to that. As oft as reason is against a man, man will be against reason. So in order to say the fair argument, it's like, in connection to what I was just saying, is a fair argument being being reason presented fairly as can be, will not be believed into the extent that once one sees what all the conclusions are that follow from this, then one realizes it will impose some things that are quote unquote against one's interest. I think in this connection, David Hume said men have interests, very well then, but it's a matter of opinion what they are, or something like that. That was a terrible way to state it, but it's something I can't remember the original formulation. It's like men have interests, but it's a matter of opinion what they are. I don't know how to formulate it, but it's sort of like, let me put it this way: your interest could be the interest of reason, and so then you find out the thing that's accords with reason also means that you have to wake up early in the morning, or impose some hardship on yourself. But that's your interest. So in other words, realism is bullshit, because it doesn't leave out the fact that we could put reason first, and people often do that. It's called having principles. So now let's look at that. So what was disturbing me is the fact that it involves the issue of feminism. Basically, at bottom is sort of at stake in a way. So let's look first at the classical issue. So if Heidegger's isn't it that Heidegger is going into the Apollonian essence, okay? And the Apollonian essence corresponds to the moment of Parmenides citing being for the first time, ontos. And then writing his so-called poem, which isn't really a poem, but sort of like something thinking or giving arguments or saying the reason or saying something that makes sense that one could then get behind and hold back all empirical forces with, just as we just mentioned, by sort of taking hardships on behalf of thinking this thing makes sense and that it can hold back against all ephemerality or pathetic transfigurations and degenerations of being, otherwise called in one version history, but not in Hegel's version, of course. We could take Heidegger's going back into this place where the Apollonian character corresponds to this sort of insight, this type of insight, that the idea can hold back against all the empirical forces, and therefore defining the empirical and giving it a certain character in the that balance, in that weighing that balance. The Apollonian corresponds to what Hegel puts at the beginning of history, but for what Heidegger would say would just be, it's his inception, it's the fons et origo, it's something that's currently going on, it's something that had its source, according to the way we locate it in the type of things I was just saying in Parmenides and the first Greek thinkers, in this type of ritual addiction to this type of behavior, of these guys traveling and competing between the different policies for the best policies of creating a polis in the archipelago of the early Greek world. And this is it. So this has to do with the Apollonian, okay? But then there's one specific polis out of all the polises. I think there may have been something like 100, but I'm not sure on the number at all, frankly. And it's called Athens, okay? So, but Athens is specifically feminist. It's specifically a feminist culture which says we shall entertain very seriously this type of idea. So, for instance, in the comedy where women are shown as becoming the leader of the polis, and then it's asked what would follow from this. Is this plausible? What if we switch roles like this? And it's asked under the Acropolis, under the most sacred site of Athene, under the most sacred atmosphere where you could hear a pin drop, in a like a courtroom, but more pious. And it's about the decisions of the polis. And so with Athena, that's like, it's totally, Athena and the Apollonian essence aren't the same thing. It could be disambiguated, and in a certain way, Heidegger is tossing aside Athena, and he's saying, no, I rather prefer Thracian Bendis, or the sister of Apollo, at least to. This is very interesting. Actually, in a way, he's saying Athena and this figure that Socrates meets in. So remember that a theorist is a guy that goes to see something like those things they have in India, where you have like a god in the middle of a roundabout. There's, a temple or something like that. The theorist was originally somebody that was sent to neighboring polises or countries. To Thrace in this case sent out a contingent to Athens, to the Piraeus, and then Socrates acted as a theorist, as it were, for the word from which theory comes, and he espied this presentation of the god Bendis, of Thracian Bendis. So we have a situation where Bendis, who is the sister of Apollo and the Huntress, it's a situation where I think Heidegger is espying one theme that hasn't been sufficiently brought out about Heidegger is that he's espying this moment where the Apollonian, the whole explosion of the first Greek thinkers, is getting a specific casting according to the Athenian character and their specific problems, and that it's not necessary that some things from the Greeks we could retain, but other things, even though they're already from 2,300 years ago, from the time of 2,400 years ago, Socrates died in 399 BC, so some things already from that time, they seem to have collapsed. But other things, this whole Apollonian thing, this is still Heidegger is saying, this Apollonian opening is still in what I'm trying to say with the Seins Vergessenheit, what Heidegger's trying to say. So let's look at the modern version now. The modern version that Heidegger is presenting is, he's saying people are just accusing me of being against technology, but what he's saying is, so far as we only think about constantly mining the resources of the material, of the sort of mysticism of constantly getting as much fuel or as much energy or actuality out of material in the form of the material sciences, in the form of basic physics. This is a kind of forgetfulness of the whole question, because it says, here's the thing that's standing still against all movement. It's the theory of the material sciences. This is what we'll never break from. But it's ignoring that there's other principles that could stand at the beginning. It's put all the cathexis around, especially even though it was already strong in Heidegger's time, and Heidegger was born in 1889 and is already visible, but not to everyone. I think the same process we see, Heidegger mentions the process that guys like Zizek become the heads of sort of research institutions and have things named after them, and that there are people who have to consciously sell their stuff to a big audience, and they become part of the provisions industry, or as it were, analogous to the provisions industry. They provide the intellectual product, somebody else provides the cleaning products, and both are sort of, one is sanitized and the other is sort of maybe not the best stuff because it's sold to make a profit and not for any other motive. But that's sort of by the side. But I mean, the point is, there's something perverse in this, that maybe the going back, resetting to the initial Apollonian essence could sort of, if we snatch out the clear vision of that, then Heidegger thinks then it becomes possible to say you could suffer certain hardships in order to put this back on the right ordering. So but then we have to see, let me end this with sort of a figure out of the current economic situation, which is what I want to say is, there's a lot of people that have a cheap vision, and so for instance, if you're progressive, then a lot of progressives, like the guy Richard Wolff, who I think is second rate to say the least, not even second rate. I think in a way he's just a Ponzi scheme, but I'm trying to just present him as an example. Here's somebody with a supposed economic theory. He says we're in the late stages of capitalism. Now, he's been saying that for 60 years and making his whole living saying that. And then there's a lot of people that like to hear that we're in the last or the most, you know, uh, point of death of capitalism. But we've been at this point. It's sort of similar to the people that say, "Oh, Russia's winning the war." And then George Samuel Ali, the guy on the gaggle, he says, "But what does that mean? Winning doesn't mean anything. It's either the war's over, you concluded it, and in which sense then you say the war they won. But if you say they're winning, well, what does that mean? Because maybe they're winning, but there'll be a reversal. Maybe they've swept in, but maybe it would turn out the enemy deliberately opened the fort, like in the Seven Samurai or something, to put them." Make them targets of the people in the inside the village. A good fort has some opening in it. Maybe it turns out Zelensky actually invited the Russians in, and they'll be slowly annihilated, even though they're like more than 3 times the population. Who knows? What does it mean to say they're winning? That somebody thinks they're winning. It's not won. So likewise, we have a situation where people think that they can tell us how to solve the economic issues, and then sometimes it just becomes a party thing, and they kept saying, "Oh, our side is winning," and that corresponds to the fact that we're in supposedly the death throes of capitalism, the late stage capitalism. Only it's never happened for 60 years, but people keep buying these Millerite tickets to it. So what I want to say is, all that is just to say economics can be very deceptive because it's so much keyed into our expectations about our hopes and dreams about how things will turn out. But now let me say, it's sort of like the fact that Heidegger has to really present a good case and a good Apollonian trajectory for us actually to have the conviction to be willing to go along with that at all those costs, to disregard the supposedly straightforward Hobbesian formulation of just saying I have interests already, what do I care about what Heidegger's reasoning shows me. So let me just present a picture of the economy that seems halfway credible either way, but which the people immediately avalanche over in political way, which is the question of, since from 1915 to 1982, it was illegal to do these so-called stock buybacks, and ever since 1982, the S&P 500 and some other of the big indexes has been constantly increasing in value. But apparently the reason is because the very wealthy are using, just as like there's an art market and the Modigliani or whatever gets, a lot of people keep putting money in it. So the reason it's worth a lot is because it's a store of value partly, but then it's also partly because other people want that same store of value. Other people want a place to put their money where then lenders will lend them money that's they can write off, that they don't have to pay taxes on for that store of value. So in a larger way, the sort of like you have like $560 trillion that has to have a home, right? So then there has to be store of value for it. But what's the best store of value? It becomes increasingly, it's either real estate or diverse other things like the artwork that I just mentioned, or gold or something. But increasingly it's to put it back into companies creating a kind of gigantic Ponzi scheme effect, right? De Beers Diamond sort of Ponzi scheme plus some sort of restricting of the market effect or something, some weird effects that are not slightly unclear in the whole thing. You have $560 trillion as against, say, $5 trillion tax intake But from this 560 trillion, rather than taking taxes, because none of it is income, all of it is sort of like people keep saying, just like people keep saying the Moglione is worth more, people keep saying this shit is like worth more, and then they keep saying GDP is increasing. This, Alphabet or Google or some knowledge economy stock. For a while, people were saying, like, for instance, Beyond Burgers or something was unclear, and now I think it's collapsed. But that was like an unestablished one. But once they get established, it's kind of like Google, where what it's worth and what its owners can take credit out against is sort of infinite. But now here's the other. So then it seems like it's corrupt or something. Oh, this is corrupt. Let's just end this stock buyback thing, which allows this artificial propping up and keeping strong of these companies as stores of value for the class of people that control that 560 trillion or whatever it is. But then on the other side, but then you see how a lot of people politically gravitate towards that immediately, because they say, oh, well, there was a start point, and then we can say there's a moment of the corruption. But then that neglects that all the companies that have built up since 1982, when that started, are in place. And then if you try to say, for instance, just do wealth taxes, just do taxes on the existing capital, the problem is, one, there's a reason why there's the corporate form. It's because it's like, if you were to say in a university, just do a 60% tax on the university. Just go to the regents and tax them. Well, but the regents don't own the university; they're just in charge of it. How would you actually do that? You'd actually have to go in and I guess sell some of the property owned by UC Berkeley, thereby actually in a way destroying the very corporation, and destroying part of what makes the corporation, its essence of the corporation, its character. In the same way with any business like Google, even if you could say, okay, that's the problem. You have to derange the whole thing if you were to do that. You'd have to kind of destroy Google, take away part of it, and say, oh, these are the this will pay for the 1.5 trillion or whatever the shortfall was on the budget, because the government paid more than the 5 trillion intake with taxes. And I mean, it makes sense logically to say, okay, make these companies pay the offset. Then at the same time, you could look and see the same class that's constantly fleeing, constantly taking the money and running, constantly looking for stores of value, has come up with this scheme of keep increasing the debt, and then one place to store value is by holding the debt on the United States, and you get really good interest on that. So this is put down also as a scam, but is it actually? It's sort of like, I guess I'd have to say Trump has a point there when he says, you guys should have made some rules to stop me from doing things that are immoral, because it becomes fetishistic not to do the practices that are just sort of required by the whole system. But the system isn't a system deliberately set up, but it's sort of, yes, in a way there's a trench warfare in the courts and there's all that, but in another way, how much is that due to the fact that all the material circumstances which come out of the technological pursuits? I mean, we know, the internet came out of some military research, and before that, many other things. So I think let's just end it at when we go further on with the Parmenides, we should understand Heidegger in the light of someone who's more soberly taken on all this kind of consideration that's usually missed by the person that's in some niche and saying, oh yeah, or, Richard Wolff or whatever, oh yeah, I'm progressive or something, or I'm a conservative or something, and then, I'm for individual rights and some kind of living in the country with libertarian pretensions or something. While at the same time very interested in the latest theories of physics and how to rebalance my fortune according to a Fibonacci some kind of system. These things all, it seems to me, in Heidegger, so Heidegger Dulphine, has to be understood as standing above the fray of lower unfair reasoning due to all these kind of factors. So that's a further meditation.